I've taken this 35mm 1.4 lens from Siru with me on all of my photo shoots this week. Some might say that 35mm is the most versatile focal length that you'll ever own. Whether you're shooting portraits or street photography, travel or fashion, it's the lens that you need. I don't know about that, but 35mm is a pretty solid focal length. I found that 35mm is a pretty good balance between perspective and intimacy. And not the kind of intimacy you're thinking of. There's a good reason why it's every wedding photographer's favorite lens. Images shot on a 35mm lens have a very natural look to them. It's a great perspective that captures your subject and your environment. I don't know if it's my favorite focal length. I find that I always struggle trying to compose with a 35, but when I see photos that other people have taken with the 35, I'm just floored and wish I could do what they could do. So maybe I just need a little bit more practice with this lens. Just so you know, Siru sent me this lens. I'm not getting paid to make this video. They don't get to see this video before it's posted. They're seeing it at the same time as you, so they have no idea what I'm gonna say about this. So for one of my days of shooting this week, I had the awesome opportunity to shoot at the Nordic Spa. It's located at the Kananaskis Pomeroy in Kananaskis country. It's quite close to Banff National Park, but it's a lot quieter, more naturey, and this is one of the only hotels in the area. I was brought on pretty last minute, and there was a team already doing video and lighting, and I was asked to do photo. Because I was brought on so last minute, the schedule that we were working with wasn't really balanced for photo and video, so I just had to piggyback off of what the video team was doing. When I'm shooting commercial work and I've got control over the lighting and my subjects, I do my best to just use prime lenses. The situation at the spa was a little unique. At times, I was poking over people's shoulders and trying to snap shots, and at other points, I just had a few minutes to capture the images that I needed. I tried to use the 35mm as much as I could. However, I did choose to put a zoom lens on because it gave me more coverage quicker. The images probably are a little bit noisier, but it's better than missing the shot. Overall, I'm really happy with all of the shots that I got though. The theme for the shoot was called Nordic Nights, which means that we were shooting late in the night when it was dark and early in the morning when it was still dark. So having a lens that did have an aperture of 1.4 did come in pretty handy. The shots that I got with this 35 were cleaner than the ones that I got with my zoom lens at 2.8. So as much as I did use that zoom lens, I still relied on that low aperture 1.4 35mm lens in the low light. Like, I'm pretty happy with how clean these images were. It was really dark out. They weren't the cleanest, but they're much cleaner than the zoom lens photos that I got. I mean, these photos are probably just going on social media like this big, but they're a lot cleaner than the zoom lens. So the reason you might get a 35mm like this, instead of a smaller 35mm like this, or a zoom lens like the one on my camera that also has a 35mm, is because of the 1.4 aperture. Both of these are 35mm. This has a 1.8 aperture, and this has a 1.4 aperture, and it's twice the price. That 1.4 aperture makes the background look so creamy and soft. With an aperture this low, you can also let more light enter the camera's sensor, which in turn means you can use a slower shutter speed and a lower ISO for cleaner images. And this comes in really handy when you're shooting in low light. Now, there's nothing wrong with these 1.8 aperture lenses. This is the 35mm I've been using for years, and I really like it because of how small it is. But this 35mm lens from Siru lets in 66% more light, which might be a reason enough to switch over to using this as my main 35mm lens. It is November in Alberta, and I can't decide whether it is coat weather or long sleeve weather. It's 9 degrees outside. It might be coat weather. So of course, having a lens that stops down to 1.4, I tried to shoot everything at 1.4, which is great if your subject is just a couple feet in front of you. That is where you can get those really creamy, amazing depth of field photos. But I found by shooting across the street or an object farther away, the f1.4 really doesn't make that large of a difference. This lens is really gonna shine if you're shooting portraits of people or product photography or something that's relatively close to your camera. The photos shot at 1.4 felt pretty sharp. They're good enough for me. I'm not gonna pixel peep and tell you if 1.4, 1.6, or whatever aperture is gonna be the most optimum, but I was really happy with how they looked. I did notice that at 1.4, there's a pretty significant vignette on your images. This isn't that big of an issue. Typically, you just select the lens in your lens corrections little drop down in Lightroom and you pick the lens and everything's good. There isn't a profile for these Siru lenses yet. It's not that big of an issue. You can just go over to the vignette section in lens corrections and remove it, but it's just something I wanted to point out. I think this is pretty common for prime lenses, and as you stop down closer to f16, this vignette goes away. It's not a deal breaker, but just something that I observed. So sometimes when you're using third-party lenses, the lenses don't always communicate as smoothly to the camera body as you would like. I found I had no issue with the Siru lens. Autofocus was pretty snappy, and even in this really low light situation, the lens was still picking out people's faces and eyes, and it caught focus every time. So this is a fistful of lens. This is a little beefier than the lenses I'm used to shooting with. This lens is made out of some sort of metal. It's definitely not plastic, and it feels fairly robust. The focus ring feels quite smooth, at least to me, and I'm not someone who manually focuses that much, and so if it wasn't smooth, I probably wouldn't even know the difference. So there's a couple switches and dials on the outside of this lens. The first is the iris lock, and this lets you change the aperture and lock it if you need to. Actually, it only lets you lock it in auto, and that's fine for me because I like controlling my aperture on my camera, not on the lens. There's a function button on the lens, which you can program to be anything. I personally like mine to be eye autofocus, so when I'm pointing at a subject, it will lock onto the eye. There's an autofocus switch to switch between autofocus and manual focus, and on the other side of the lens, there's a click button, which you can turn on or off. There's some nice branding on this lens, the Aurora 35mm, and this logo from Siru in some sort of bright blue. On the back side of this lens, there is a USB-C port. I don't think that's for charging your phone. I believe it's for updates. I guess you could probably update this lens. I've never done that. Maybe that's something I should do. And if it matters to you, the filter thread on this lens is 62mm. In the past couple of years, I've tried to get all of my lenses to have the same filter size, which is 67mm. Most of my Sony lenses are from Tamron, and all of the filter sizes for those lenses are 67mm, and I've tried to carry that across all of my lenses. Earlier this year, or maybe end of last year, I got a 85mm 1.4 from Siru. I believe it's like the matching pair to this 35mm that we're talking about, and this lens has a 67mm, the 85. However, this 35mm has a 62mm. Why are these filter threads different sizes? I want all of these filter sizes to be the same so I can take a filter from one lens and swap it over to another lens really quickly. I feel like this lens could have been a little thicker at the top to accommodate that larger filter size. Unfortunately, that isn't the case, so I have this really inexpensive solution. It's a step-up ring, and you screw it on the front of this lens, and it converts a 62mm to a 67mm. It's not the end of the world for me, but I don't have any filters that are this size, so the step-up ring is the way I'm gonna solve this. Overall, the lens has a nice weight to it. It's not too big, it's not too small. It fits really nice in my camera bag, and it feels great when it's attached to your camera. I live in Canada, and whatever Canadian price I put on screen, you're probably not gonna understand. So I'll put the price of this lens compared to some other similar lenses on screen. I'm not saying one is better than others. I haven't tried all of these lenses, but maybe you have a preference of lens brand that you prefer. But here they all are in USD, at least according to when I filmed this in November 2025. Hopefully this video has been helpful for you, especially if you're trying to decide whether you should purchase this lens or a different one. If you do decide to get this lens, I'll add a link in the description below, and there'll be some more information on that page. I've got a bunch more videos about cameras and tech and productivity on my page, so if you're interested in those, make sure you check those out. My name's Davey, thanks for letting me spill the gravy, and we'll see you in the next video.